Hello everyone, welcome to Achievers IAS classes. Let's begin our discussion on the current events of 22nd January 2018. The first issue in news is regarding the disqualification of 20 legislators of the Aam Aadmi Party who are appointed as parliamentary secretaries. We'll look into this issue by clubbing various articles as well as an editorial in the Hindu today. The disqualification comes based on Election Commission's advice to the President that the office of parliamentary secretaries constituted an office of profit, thereby attracting disqualification. The Delhi government had previously made it clear that the parliamentary secretaries were not eligible for any remuneration and were allowed to use only government transport and office space of the respective ministries for official uses. But the Supreme Court, in its previous judgments, had ruled that the role of government in appointing and paying a person is a test of whether a post constitutes an office of profit. And in the Jaya Bachchan case, the court had said that mere requirement of remuneration for a post is not a sufficient criteria for not to be declared as an office of profit. What we need to note here is various state governments in the past have passed legislations to exempt posts from the definition of office of profit to avoid disqualification. But in the case of Delhi, it could not do so because, unlike state governments, important legislations in Delhi need the approval of Lieutenant Governor. But the Delhi government was also aware that several judicial decisions have ruled that parliamentary secretary was a way of getting around the constitutional limit on the size of council of ministers. Therefore, the principle of limiting the size of council of ministers to avoid conflict of interest between the legislators and the executive has to be ultimately upheld. With that, let's move on to the next issue in news, which is regarding transparency in work allocation at the Supreme Court. As I have already discussed in my previous news analysis video, four senior Supreme Court judges had accused the Chief Justice of India of maladministration with respect to allocation of cases. In this regard, the CJI, after examining suggestions made by various stakeholders to bring transparency in allocation of sensitive PILs, is likely to adopt a system which is more transparent. In this regard, the court registry is expected to upload on its website the decision of the CJI on allocation of matters. Given the serious allegations made by the four senior Supreme Court judges, this is a step in the right direction. The next issue in news is regarding the upcoming budget and the impact of GST on government revenues. One of the biggest challenges facing Indian finance ministers is the country's narrow tax base. The goods and services tax was aimed at widening the tax base of the indirect taxes, in the meanwhile plugging leaks in the indirect tax compliance system. The GST system in this regard was very promising because it brought various small and mid-sized businesses under its ambit, as it mandates registration of all entities with the annual turnover of rupees 20 lakh or above and a built-in self-policing mechanism based on input tax credit and invoice matching. But the larger base so far hasn't translated into a greater collection of indirect taxes because the tax rates were subsequently revised, particularly for those goods and services in the highest 28% bracket to address any inflationary impact due to the imposition of GST. The other reasons include falling compliance and glitches in the GST network, which have created problems for filing returns for various entities. All these have further increased the challenges for the finance ministry with respect to this year's budget because in the pre-GST era, union budgets relied heavily based on the tax collection numbers of the previous years and their extrapolations for the current year. The finance ministry used data from the Central Board of Excise and Customs to compile sector-wise indirect tax collections for the previous year and source growth projections from respective ministries to arrive at its forecast for the next year. But the problem with this approach was the actual revenues of the government were less than the estimated revenues, leading to a last-minute scramble and aggressive tax collections. The GST has overcome this shortcoming by giving real-time data on tax collections. But given that the GST system is less than a year old, there is no clear picture of the real potential of GST which is available while formulating this year's budget. Another challenge ahead of the finance minister is industry groups lobbying for indirect tax cuts. But with various indirect taxes like the excise duty and service tax included under the ambit of GST, the finance minister has limited room for any maneuvering with these taxes because any revision of these rates now vests with the GST Council. This challenge also gives an opportunity for the budget to focus on aspects of government finance, to cut down the unproductive revenue expenditure, and reforming the tax administration in the country. We'll further look into this issue once the union budget is out in public domain. Till then, let's move on to the next issue in news, which is talking about various issues preventing greater adoption of rooftop solar. As we all know, the government of India has set an ambitious target to generate 1 gigawatt of solar energy by March 2022, 60,000 megawatt from large plants and 40,000 megawatt from rooftop solar against a target of 10,000 megawatt for the year 2018. The achievement is just 923 megawatt, thereby highlighting the shortcomings of the rooftop part of the solar energy ambitions of the country. This is because the adoption of rooftop solar is still not attractive to individual house owners because they receive subsidized power supply by the electricity discoms operating in that area. And in case of large consumers like shopping malls and factory buildings, the discoms find ways of preventing them from adopting rooftop solar plants because they are the biggest consumers of power by these discoms. One of the ways through which they discourage rooftop solar plants is by refusing to buy surplus from these entities. And in many states like Tamil Nadu, net metering is disallowed, which measures the power put into the grid by these rooftop solar plants. Other states impose a cap on the capacity allowed for net metering, thereby restricting the growth of this sector. Further, the recent recommendation of the Commerce Ministry to impose a safeguard duty on imported solar panel has the potential to cripple the entire solar industry. In this regard, the government put out a concept note which proposes to provide incentives for the discoms for the rooftop solar capacity created by them in their operating areas, thereby hoping to create an enabling ecosystem for rooftop plants. The incentives offered may encourage the discoms to augment the capacity, but the lack of provision for a third party developer and the inherent bias in the scheme for entities of larger size might not be beneficial for the government's goal of increasing rooftop solar plants. A better approach in this regard would be based on generation based incentives where the government could incentivize based on the power generated rather than the capacity created, because a similar scheme has already achieved success in the wind sector. In this regard, the need of the hour is not to incentivize discoms but to encourage outside private players to augment rooftop solar power capacity. The final issue in news is regarding the various protests carried out by the Rajput community in Gujarat over the release of the Bollywood movie Padmavat. I have already covered the issue in detail in the current news analysis of 20th January, and I request those who have missed it to go back and watch the same. With that, I conclude today's news analysis. Do like, share, and comment to support this initiative. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.